I want to first see the Preach video about Heavensward because I'm pretty sure it's not spoilery. Can anybody confirm or deny if this video right here that I'm about to show, is this spoilers? Some spoilers for Heavensward. Very light, very mild. I know it's from 3 expansions ago, but the thing is that not every single person started Final Fantasy XIV at the same time on the same day and finished all the story at the same time. There's some people that just started. So, yeah, okay, here we go.
Only once in my life has a video game ever moved me to tears. That was a couple of years ago in a video game called Rime, and it's not because I'm a heartless, soulless, cold machine. It's just that, for the most part, video game stories are somewhat predictable. They're cliche, and very rarely do you get something that moves you absolutely. I've been close a couple of times, but Heavensward just pretty much did that. And it's definitely worth talking about. This is video game storytelling done about as good as it can possibly be. Let's take a look.
Oh man. Well, Heavensward is when I first started playing the game. A lot of you may know that about me already, but that's the expansion that I had heard at the time that it had gotten a lot of positive reviews, and that was Warlords of Draenor era, and so that's when I decided to maybe give it a try because I heard it was really good. But
one of the biggest problems MMOs always face, and this is for every MMO, is the ability to tell an RPG story, because RPG stories have come a very, very long way since the early days.
What is this? What is this? This spoiler mayhap contains some mild spoiler clips for Heavensward. Try watch it to your own. Okay.
Not to say that early days RPG stories aren't some of the best, still to this day, ever written, and I always refer back to Chrono Trigger as being one of the most intense, heart-pounding stories ever told in an RPG, as well as in the Baldur's Gate series, and the list goes on. But MMOs have a difficulty, and that's because most of them ascribe to a very simple creed. Everybody should be able to play together as much as they want. There should be nothing in the game that's saying you can't play with your friends, because that's what an MMO is all about, teaming up. And often, when you present yourself...
But why should that ever get in the way of a good story?
With video game choices, as opposed to movies, which just play out in a linear fashion, you present people with choices. You look to any games like the Fallout series or the Witcher series, and you're constantly making decisions, and in the good RPGs, they play out in a number of different ways, depending on the path you have chosen. That's fine in a single-player environment. However, when it comes to MMOs, makes it extraordinarily difficult because often you want to present the player with choices that naturally would dictate that they can no longer associate with their friends if they went in a different way. That does not mean it's impossible, and I think it's one of the biggest issues that MMO companies of next year and the next 10 years are going to be finding ways of introducing that style into their games and finding a way to allow it to work, because frankly, it's those weighty, meaningful choices, pardon the pun, that make things matter.
It's really interesting that he says this at the beginning of talking about Heavensward, because, I mean, Final Fantasy XIV's story is very much, like, on rails. Like, it's pretty linear. There's nothing that you can say that's going to change the course of the story, so that's not necessarily a requirement for having an excellent story in an RPG. But
however, that doesn't mean you can't tell a great, if not
a
fantastic story
Actually, yeah.
in an MMO. That doesn't mean that whatsoever. And if you want proof of the pudding, it would be Heavensward in Final Fantasy XIV.
All right.
I spoke to you at length.
I've paused it too soon. I should have let him finish his thought.
Last update I did to Heavensward about how much I was enjoying the story. It had been told to me almost in a meme fashion that it was critically acclaimed, that it was just the most extraordinary thing ever. I even shipped 2 characters, which would have been Estinian and Lady Iceheart, up until the point I was in the story. Needless to say, for those...
He thought he was getting memed on when we said that Final Fantasy XIV's free trial includes the Heavensward expansion, which is critically acclaimed and allows you to go up to level 60. He thought that was a meme. He thought we weren't serious about that.
So you played Heavensward, that did not work out. That did not work out whatsoever. That's sad. That's really, really sad.
Okay.
But today
yeah, it was such a funny way he said it too, almost in a meme fashion. It's such a polite way of saying it.
I actually don't want to put any spoilers in this, because I know a number of people are not actually up to where I am, because
it seems there may be some mild spoilers.
As anybody who's recently joined FF14, I do get to stream the game, which means I can put in 8-9 hours a day as part of my regular work day. And that means that I moved ahead of a lot of people, including some people who work at Preach Gaming, who are...
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Like the editor. Is the editor getting spoiled from editing the video? Oh man! Oh man!
Are trying to play whenever they can when they're not doing stuff for me in the background. So I'm not going to do that.
Oh, no.
What I am going to talk to you about a little is how this storytelling can be done right, and how Heavensward has reached what I would consider the number 2 spot on my best video game stories ever told. For those of you wondering, the number 1 story for me is still the Shadow Man in Divinity Original Sin 2. That is because that game is a single-player game.
I should finish that game.
Allowed them to afford you to make the
I
most
started it, then I got distracted.
soul-crushing choice imaginable in a video game, and they set it up super well. But the setup is the important part here. So I guess this is more of a comment for anybody thinking like about Heavensward, especially those of you who are prone to skipping story in MMOs, perhaps because you've got an extensive background in something like World of Warcraft, where generally reading those text boxes just isn't worth your time. Ultimately, you might end up reading something like 3 or 4 paragraphs to find out you need to go east of the cave in order to kill the 10 Defias mobs. Very standard stuff, and it's the first thing, similar to Path of Exile, that turns you off from listening to a very long diatribe that ultimately results in something very, very simple, and you feel like you've had your time.
The thing is, with World of Warcraft and reading the text from NPCs that you get in quests, is that I always felt like all of the NPCs kind of have the same way of speaking, and they all sound really, really similar in the text. Like even here, he has it paused on Venari, and it's just there's not a whole lot of personality, not a whole lot of character in the quest text. It's just like, I have a safe enclave nearby. A company there may be able to help you find the waystone you're looking for. Do we have a deal? Like, but in Final Fantasy, like if you talk to an NPC that's in Limbs of Lamenza, he's gonna be like, oh, actually, you know what? I have it saved. Actually, I have a really good one. Hold on a minute. Okay, I want to see if I can find it. I shouldn't be looking for this right now, but I want to because I saved a screenshot once of... Oh, I found it. Okay, I found it. This Limsa NPC. I love this. Oh. He's like, bloody hell's me throat's parched. Can't wait till me shift's over so I can drown myself in ale. Aye, that and a buxom bar wench to dandle on me lap. Sorry. That and a buxom bar wench to dandle on me lap. Anyway, it's what I'm trying to say is that NPCs have a lot of character in them. Okay, let's move on to this.
Time wasted, and so the next time you just skip it and read whatever the TLDR version is in your quest log. Let's talk a little bit about Heavensward. At least the second half is Heavensward. Okay. I'm about to complete Heavensward's main story. I have 1 patch to go, which from what I can tell is going to be the setup for the next expansion for the most part, but perhaps not.
Okay.
And how it nearly... pretty much did bring me to tears. I didn't bawl like a baby, but my eyes welled up significantly. And this involves the wonderful, and what I want to talk about, and
who didn't cry during Heavensward, though, seriously? Come on. Come on.
Put this message out to other devs that we are working with, who are working on RPGs,
Ooh,
and you'll hear more about
Emmerich.
that in the future, is how important it is to take your goddamn time. In the last video, some of you responded well to me comparing it a little bit to the Marvel versus DC worlds, which many of us are familiar with, and how we saw DC's...
Nidhogg and Rice Holger, which one is Marvel and which one is DC? Y'all, which one? Who's who?
Universe try and rush everything through to catch up, in a sense, to the Marvel Universe. And they didn't take their time. They didn't let these stories breathe. They didn't let their characters grow. And it was a recent video I watched from Red Letter Media about Midnight Mass, where they applauded, and I agreed fully, that they let their characters breathe. They let their characters talk. They let their characters establish a personality, a backstory, how they currently feel, how they used to feel, and how their minds are changing and evolving in a nice, slow way, which made you care about those characters. And for the things I want to talk about today, there's basically 2. Ultimately, a storyline in Final Fantasy XIV eventually somewhat encompasses maybe 30 primary characters. And Heavensward very much does that. It involves high houses of Ishgard, it involves their militant arm, it involves their religious wing, it involves storylines developing from a realm reborn with characters who happen to be nearby. It happens to involve stories that take place in lands that you haven't seen yet, which came with the expansion. So ultimately you end up dealing with about 50 characters. Now that's a lot, and it's a lot to make them important. And what did they do? They took their goddamn time. But ultimately, they had a roadmap. And recently, when 9.2 was announced in World of Warcraft, I talked at length about how important it is to have that roadmap, to say, we're starting here and we're ending there. And ultimately, when it comes to storytelling, they decided, actually, this just needs a couple of payoffs, but the big payoff, the really big payoff that really matters, is just going to be between two characters.
So, about payoffs, like emotional payoff. This is a really good point he made about letting characters breathe, like establishing who this character is and giving them time to develop. So that way you will care about them enough when that surprising or like shocking moment happens. I think that's a mistake that WoW has made a lot recently in their storytelling, is that there's a lot of shock moments, but there's none of the establishment of like motive and like letting the characters breathe and like understanding, getting to know these characters better to lead up to that. Heavensward especially, I think, is in many ways more so than Realm Reborn, has a lot of little moments that are all very carefully built up well. You can always look back and see, oh, here's all the little pieces that they put in place all in a row for me to look back on, and now I can fully appreciate why this is happening now, why this character made this decision now, and it has more of an impact on me because I see what brought us to this point.
And in order for that situation to have that level of payoff, those two characters need to feel and experience, and the player needs to understand the heartache and emotion and the nightmare world that is around them. And those two characters would be Sir Emeric and the dragon Hrelsvagar. Now, not going into too much detail of them, again, I would love you guys to experience this. Certainly those of you who may have bought a pass and skipped.
Man, I've got to replay
to get past
this.
The story, because the story is lengthy, there's no doubt about that. But to understand, this is worth going back and playing. And it's I can see now, in many ways, how upset people get when it's like, you're not appreciating what's here. If you skip, you're not appreciating what's been done here. Now, story isn't for everybody. I'm not going to even claim it is. I know plenty of people who I could tell them it's the best book in the world. They're never going to read it.
Yeah, some
the
people
best
don't care
movie
about
I've ever seen.
Story.
Never going to watch it. I understand that. But for those of you who have some inkling of
I
video
think most people do care about story, though. They just don't want to... I mean... They don't want to waste their time, you know? I think most people do care. I mean, aren't most people like sitting around watching Netflix and like enjoying a good story from a TV show, or like you have movies you enjoy and stuff? Like, I think it's unusual. It's possible, but it's unusual for you to be a person that just doesn't like to be told stories at all. I think in general people do enjoy this.
Stories, and maybe have an MMO past who is used to waiting just for the big cutscenes and things like that to tell you what's going on. But this is a totally different experience. Those two characters are designed to be the ultimate payoff to this ending. And all of the 48 characters, however many there are, that are just the side attractions to this, are all playing a pivotal role leading to this one moment. And this one moment requires such a roller coaster to get there that it's unbelievable that it was so clearly paced and planned for multiple patches.
Yeah.
Now, I want to think about that in multiple patches, because we've probably got, some of you will probably say, oh, the story's been set out, and recently with ties to like, oh, we're ending Warcraft 3, which kind of technically is true with some sliding stuff in there, but you can see that this is not a character that was developed a long time ago. This is a character that's new, and they've tried to squeeze it in here and there and use references of past to make it make some sort of sense.
What is what is this? Is the jailer twerking over here? What? The editors lost their mind because they're getting spoiled on Heavensward making this video. Okay. I mean, it's true. It's true. And wow, they took this new character, the jailer, and like suddenly the jailer is the reason why Arthas made a lot of decisions that he made, and Anyway, we don't need to get into that right now. We really don't. This is about Heavensward.
Case of saying, no, this is where this goes, and we need all these elements to happen all along the way in order for this to work. And if we don't do that, it won't have the gravitas we want it to have. And the players aren't going to be shattered into 1,000 pieces when this happens. They won't understand the weight of this choice. They won't understand how they can make two characters so distinctly different. One, a dragon who has lived practically for eternity, that made a choice 1,000 years ago, which reflects the same choice. A man born in a ultra-religious society and was a bastard child and all those kind of things, who had to make a similar choice. And between those two, they managed to bring about the end of a 1,000-year war. And for good reason. Because they were able to connect on a way that makes absolute sense. And when you see that connection happen, that's when it gets you. Now, I did say it brought me to tears. That wasn't the story that brought me to tears. What did, actually, was the send-off for a main character. Now, here's another thing why I wanted to talk about story mainly today, is that one thing that really baffled me, and again, this comes back to the roadmap idea. One thing that super baffled me was at the end of A Realm Reborn, in the space of maybe 10 minutes, they set up something like 7 really important plot points.
Yeah, it is so crazy and ridiculous how the end of Realm Reborn raises the stakes so high and so fast. Like, you feel like you've been through this slog of a ton of quests right before you get to Heavensward, and then all of a sudden it's like pop, 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 pop. Like things get real really quick, and you pretty much have whiplash by the time you get into Heavensward trying to figure out what's going on.
With differing characters.
Yeah, it gets real.
They killed off major characters. In a space of 10 minutes, they made massive sweeping changes.
Yeah.
Instead of having a nice tidy bow to wrap up and say, we're done here. This part of the game is done. We're going on to the next part of the game. Instead, they said, we kind of wrapped it up before. Now it's all turning into this. And very quickly, everything unravels and that nice, pretty bow is ripped to shreds on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
And it's now time to move on to something
It's just chaos. And
you're
lost, you don't know where to go, you don't know what's going to happen to your character, and it's time for Heavensward.
Damn balls to not address some of those things that they set up all those many years and months ago until the very end of the expansion, leaving you constantly worrying. Not worrying, but more theorizing,
I was worried. I was super worried.
Yourself. And I posted on Twitter, it's like, after you play this, you don't trust anybody.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly going, well, what's happened to this person? And you know, because the storytelling's done so well, that person has
the shot of Ida as he's talking about how you can't trust anybody.
a role to play. But they're letting it breathe.
I didn't say anything.
And there's a trust that I've already developed, even though this story's already out and I could Google it and Wikipedia it, and perhaps it all falls apart in the future, I don't know. Yeah. But there's a trust there, it's like, they're going to make it happen.
Sus.
You know it's coming back, because they don't forget about these things. They don't just dispense with what's happened in the past. They don't just leave the giant dagger in the planet and say, we'll talk about it next time. You know it's going to be referenced. You know they're going to deal with it, and you know they're going to tidy it up.
Yeah, they don't have to do that so that they can use it later for a later expansion, right? It's like, even when Bolvar got stuck on the throne, everybody knew. Even back then, we're like, okay, well, we better keep somebody there because we're having another expansion in the future. We're going to have Bolvar. Yes. And now I think the same thing happened with Illidan. They just take all these major characters and like just put them in a pocket to use for later. That's not really happening. Like in Final Fantasy XIV, like we don't have tentacles coming out of the ground to grab Nidhogg, and now nobody knows where Nidhogg is because he's like been taken away to the void. And we're like, well, I guess we'll see him again sometime. Like, let's lock this bad guy away. And I guess we'll see him again sometime. Like, we'll just make new characters. How about that?
And as I mentioned, as many of you will know by now, that they killed off so many characters at the end of Realm Reborn.
The wounds.
And they did a send-off.
Well, I think you can't actually take the sword out because it will break. It will kill everything, right? Right? I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Essentially, to one of those main characters. And they did it in a way that felt ridiculous at the start. And this is what kind of pays off. And it very much reminds me of the Hideo Kojima games. Is they're often seemingly ridiculous and cheesy and kind of silly. And in this case, it was the Warriors of Darkness. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God. Really?
You don't even know,
This is so cheesy.
You don't know,
And
man.
at the end of their story, crushed me completely.
You think you've been crushed?
I was like, oh my God.
You think
And I
you've
felt
been
like-
crushed at the end of the... You don't even know, buddy. You just buckle in. Buckle
And
in.
what I felt when I started a Final Fantasy XIV, which is that the Lalafell, I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to deal with Lalafell and Moogles. And then ultimately I ended up in love with that story. Not exactly like loving the Lalafells, but in love with that story.
You get ready.
And it made me care about them, and it made me interested in them. And
But wait a minute. Weren't the Warriors of Darkness like what I just described? Like, weren't they actually characters that were put away, and then we were all like, well, I'm sure we'll deal with them later. Another It worked. It worked in this game, though. So I guess it's possible. It's
to
fine.
have this kind of moment happen with the Warriors of Damn Darkness.
Roll roll your eyes all you
Hey,
want
it's been
right
2
now.
months. Happy to be a part of this community.
Because,
It's like, okay. Sure, dude. To have that happen and to be sat here like,
but even then, yeah, he still got crushed from it. That was such a good
is
story.
everything done right?
It's, yeah,
And
it's good,
I
man.
hope this conversation encourages some of you, even if you skip the story, just to go back and... this is the stupid thing about FF14, which is so impossible. And recently I went through that I had a friend leave World of Warcraft who was a world first raider from Vanilla, world first at Kel'Thuzad, of all places. Joined FF14 because 9.15 did not bring anybody back to World of Warcraft. And he was like, well, I should come and play Final Fantasy. And I was like, look, dude. He's like, what should I do? What class? And he made all those classic mistakes that I made. He's like, what class should I play? Does my race matter? What's the best gear I'm looking? You know, all the usual stuff
Trying to
that
be
you associate
optimal.
with a World of Warcraft game. And I'm like, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. You need to go it in a different way. And they both have their strengths. And I know World of Warcraft's not doing great right now, but it's still it's still one of my favorite games of all time. And then he
Hey,
skips,
it's me.
He skipped the story.
Hey, it's
And
me.
He just was like, so much dialogue. Like,
Yeah, it's,
can't be bothered.
that's
there's a little Lalafell queen. There's
my
a guy
dude.
shouting at me and so on, and he skipped. And I've no doubt he probably won't last because it's not
Yeah.
like he's now at endgame. He went straight to the endgame. Let's go for the endgame. Let's go raiding and do dungeons.
he
and things.
skipped and now.
It's not really like that. It's not that kind of game.
See?
And he's like, okay. I was like, come and look at the houses. And he's like, all right. You know what I mean? It's very difficult to explain it to people.
So did
which
you
is
hear
probably why I
that? He told a story about his friend who joined Final Fantasy XIV and skipped because he just wanted to get straight to the end game. But now what is he doing? Nothing. Just waiting around while Mike has an incredible experience going through the story and he has absolutely no idea what to do with himself. And Mike says that he probably won't even continue playing the game. Why? Well, I guess he doesn't have any investment in his character and all of this could have been avoided if he just played the story.
didn't get involved in the first place. But I did.
Guess it's not for everyone, you know.
I have done Alexander as well. At the moment, we're not doing the Savages until after I've finished the MSQ of Heavensward. I'm saving that content for them. But even that story, I'm blown away, man, every time. And I feel like a shill, but it's hard to describe this content that is so old and not just go and fucking play it. And I know many of you watch this who already played it. You're like,
Both healers are down. This is not looking good. Is there anybody that can res? This does not look good at all.
The streamer didn't know or YouTuber didn't know, but now you know. But it's also my duty to say to anybody out there who's
That's what I
just to inform you of good things, right? Just to inform you of good things. I'm going to move into the more gameplay stuff after this.
What job are they?
I'm going to hit the end of this story tomorrow. And then we've got extremes and
It's a
things
black
that I want
range.
to do, which is the gameplay side, which has been getting better and better and better.
They're
So I'm hoping to experience that. But I just wanted to sit down and say, this is how it's done. Slow and steady. let it breathe, and don't even show your hand. I had no idea those two characters would be the pinnacle of what this was supposed to be. I had no idea. They're in the story, but so are 48 other characters who all have their own important, well-developed roles to
Were there
play.
really 50 characters that were fleshed out in Heavensward?
They're all there. They're all thrown in there, and they allow development of every single one of them to carry forward into the next one, and to make them stronger and better characters, or even people you look down upon now, or distrust heavily, even though you want to trust them. And that's the kind of investment and immersion you want out of your games, and it's right here. So
It's right
thank
here.
you so much for
That's what
listening.
that's what I've been telling
And,
you. That's what I've been
that
trying to
may be a
say
place
this
for you.
whole time. Heavensward touches on so many different important things. Like there's so many deep themes that are what's the word I want to use? Explored. I don't know why that's a hard word to remember in Heavensward. Like we're talking about tradition, letting go of the past, and yet holding on to the tradition. We're talking about war and how people have just been going off to war in the name of patriotism, and in light of the immediate threat that they've been facing for generations. You know, it's very honorable to go out and be a dragoon, very honorable to go out and kill dragons, but at the same time, how many people even questioned the reasoning for that war or why it began? And isn't it important to question those things? Like all of that was so respectfully and tastefully explored in Heavensward. And like the knights are not, nothing is really, even though it seems like it would be such a black and white thing, like, oh, these dragons are really bad, they're attacking our city, look at all these people that are dying because of the dragons like setting the city on fire over something that happened an extremely long time ago. You know, there's so much more depth to it than that. There's heart to find a character that, you know, you love. It shows you like what the pinnacle of a knight can be.
So there you have it.
Oh, that's
That is
it.
my current take on Heavensward, and I am literally about to walk into Stormblood tomorrow and see what's waiting for me there. I'll be amazed if it gets better than this, but I'm assured by many in the community it will get better, and perhaps I will be able to topple that #1 spot on my best ever video game stories ever told.
Yes, you will. Yes,
A lot
you
of people
will.
keep asking me questions of things that I simply can't answer.